American vs. French Revolution. Nearly 14 years apart and across an ocean on two different continents, two separate revolutions took place. The American Revolution began on April 19, 1775 to September 3, 1783, in a retaliation against the British Parliament's heavy hand on the colonies. The French Revolution began on May 5, 1789 to November 9, 1799, in retaliation against the French monarchy. Both these revolutions were fueled by the fires of the Enlightenment and the idea of throwing off a government that was not in favor of the people. Let's start with the American Revolution. How the Enlightenment impacted the American Revolution. The Enlightenment was focused on the full potential of man and the ability to become the perfect man. It was a full development of rationalism, a new way of looking at man's capabilities and how reason and logic should prevail. It was the idea that all nature worked on laws, and therefore all reality worked on natural laws, so those laws could be applied to other forms of life. John Locke's influence on the American Revolution was as much freedom as possible to better society, a limited government that served to promote men's life, liberty, and property, a representative democracy, and people elect and people can overthrow those leaders in authority. Baron de Montesquieu's influence on the American Revolution was the division of powers between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. Voltaire's influence was that he valued honesty and simple lives. Jean-Jacques Rousseau's influence on the American Revolution was that he promoted middle-class values of hard work, practicality, and domestic ideas, and also that decisions were made by the community and laws are made directly by the people. The Enlightenment influence on the American Revolution spurred the people on to have a government that was for the people. The American idea of virtue, integrity, and finding your own way, along with the American spirit of self-determinism, along with Republican virtues. It also influenced the writing of the Declaration of Independence, where it put many people in power, not just a few, and it was the voice of the people. It also influenced the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution, where everyone could find themselves in the Constitution, and as well the Bill of Rights listing the rights of the citizens. We can see this in the Declaration of Independence by that all men are created equal, unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, just powers from the consent of the governed, and the right of the people to after or abolish it. The Enlightenment ideas can also be seen in the preamble to the Constitution, where it promotes general welfare and promotes liberty. Religious background in the U.S. during the American Revolution. A set of religious arguments against British Empire in relation to colonies, and colonies consisted of many different religions and denominations, predominantly Protestant. Social hierarchies influence. It was not as much of an impact on the Revolution. The people had a common enemy, the British, and were not connected to each other. They banded together to throw off the British government. The aims of those involved. For the British, it was to subdue the colonies. For the colonists, it was to get more freedom from the British government. After the war, there were two sides for the government, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists wanted to have a stronger central government so that the country could function correctly and longer. The Anti-Federalists wanted to have a government more in the hands of the people so they did not end up how they were under British rule. The group of colonies coming together to form an independent nation was not the goal, but the outcome. It was more of an experiment of a government. The French Revolution. The Enlightenment influence on the French Revolution. There was a rise in middle class and political materials that saw the excess from the American Republic. It was influenced largely by the same thinkers as the American Revolution, of the ideas of natural rights, separation of powers, and social contract. The Declaration of the Rights of Man in 1789 by the National Assembly of Peasants was also influenced by the Enlightenment. Individual rights and freedoms were fundamental to human nature, and government existed only to protect that. More people were reading, they didn't need to depend on traditional authorities, and were engaging with ideas in a new way, and politicization from the Enlightenment. We can see this influence on the Declaration of the Rights of Man. We see this in that men are born and remain free and equal rights, the idea of general good, natural, and imprescriptible rights, that all sovereignty resides essentially in the nation, the ideas of liberty and freedom, and the idea that, hence, the exercise of the natural rights of each man has no limits except those which assures to the other members of society the enjoyment of the same rights. And we see it in the idea of the general will: all citizens are equal in the eyes of the law, none shall be disquieted on account of opinion or religious views, and that free communication of ideas and opinion is one of the most precious of the rights of man. Here is the idea of Wells' suggestion of the 4 phases of the French Revolution. I will not read it right now, but if you want to pause and look at the phases, you may, to get a better understanding. Religious background in France for the French Revolution. France had lots of instability with religious toleration in the past. There was lots of persecution of the Huguenots. The First Estate was made up of just clergy who did not need to pay many taxes. The Revolution was meant to help separate church and state. To get rid of the estates, the power of the religious leaders and the power they gave to the monarchs needed to be taken down. Social hierarchy. Social hierarchy played a big role in the French Revolution. It was major fuel to the fires of the Revolution. In France, the social class is referred to as estates. Taxation only was on peasants, not on the nobles, kings, or clergy. The National Assembly was created by the peasants and made the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Aims of those involved. The Third Estate was made up of commoners, peasants, middle-class artisans, and merchants. They wanted the revolution to throw off the government that did not give them any political power. They wanted liberty, equality, and fraternity, which is national unity. Individual rights and freedoms were fundamental to human nature, and the government existed only to protect that. For the First and Second Estates, which was the nobility, royalty, and clergy, they wanted to subdue the commoners and keep the monarchy in power. Now that we understand the revolutions, let's do a little bit of comparing and contrasting of them. First, let's compare. The Enlightenment thoughts were fuel to both of the revolutions. They were rebellions against governments, which were oppressive, and both revolutions had widespread influence on the world after. They spread democratic thought and the idea of getting rid of monarchy, and the idea of more power to the people. And they also wanted to take care of the people and grow economically as a country. Independence and the rights were a goal. This was examples in the Napoleonic Code and the Bill of Rights. Both wanted representative governments. Contrast. The type of government that they replaced with after the Revolution was authoritarian dictatorship in France versus the Confederation/Federal Republic in America. The reasons for rebellions were different. The social hierarchy was a bigger player in France and not so much in America. They wanted to throw off the government and wanted to throw off social structure and government. The Declaration of Independence was also different from the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Religious backgrounds was a big player in France, but not as much in America because the people there had come for religious freedoms. In France, women lost many rights under the new government of Napoleon. In America, they protected people's rights by having the Bill of Rights, whereas in France, it was the Napoleonic Code.